Once, a wealthy man reached the breaking point with his son and decided to punish him by making him marry a simple waitress. However, he was shocked by what his deceitful son ended up doing. Evan, the son of a successful businessman named Richard, had been wasting every opportunity life had given him. He constantly drank and gambled away large sums of money at casinos. Every time Richard tried to talk to his son about the importance of work, respect for others, and the value of humility, Evan would just laugh it off and continue living his reckless lifestyle. Evan, who had never worked a day in his life, preferred to live extravagantly, attending parties, drinking, and gambling. All the money Richard gave him was blown on nights of excessive spending, drinking, and massive losses at casinos. Each night ended in heavy debt, which Evan couldn't repay. Richard had bailed his son out more than once, paying huge sums to cover Evan's debts. Yet, with each passing day, the debts grew larger. Even when Richard blocked his son's access to his credit cards, Evan continued to borrow money from friends, promising them that his father would help him out again. Over time, Evan's debts became so overwhelming that Richard realized this couldn't go on. He could no longer watch his son destroy not only his own life but their family's reputation. Richard saw that Evan's addiction to alcohol and gambling was growing stronger by the day, and if something wasn't done soon, the situation would turn disastrous. One evening, when Evan stumbled home drunk with yet another story of his casino losses, Richard made a firm decision that this would be the last time. The next day, he summoned Evan to his office for a serious conversation. Evan entered his father's study with a slight annoyance, unaware of what awaited him. "Evan, we need to talk," Richard began, his voice firm and resolute. "I can't continue paying your debts and rescuing you from creditors. You're wasting money at casinos, drinking, and every time you come home, it's with more debts. This has to stop." Evan sighed heavily, expecting yet another lecture, but this time Richard wasn't just there to give him a moral lesson. "You have two options," Richard continued. "Either I send you to a clinic for treatment for alcoholism and gambling addiction, or you start a new life by marrying a simple waitress who knows the value of hard work and making your own way. You will learn to live without my money, start working, and understand what true values are. Choose." At first, Evan couldn't believe what he was hearing. His father had never given him such a harsh ultimatum before. He was furious at the thought of being sent to a clinic, but the idea of marrying someone his father would choose was just as unappealing. Get married? And live a normal life? Evan laughed sarcastically. "Are you serious, Dad?" "Dead serious," Richard replied coldly. "It's either the clinic or marriage. There is no third option. I'm tired of your debts and your reckless behavior. You've squandered every opportunity I've given you. You've shown complete disrespect for hard work and the people around you. So, I've decided that something needs to change. If you're not ready to grow up, you'll lose everything that you hold dear." Evan realized his father wasn't joking. His comfortable life was falling apart before his eyes, and he had to make a choice. He could either go to a clinic and admit he had a problem, or accept his father's condition and begin a new life. The clinic seemed humiliating, and the thought of being confined for treatment was unbearable to him. So, reluctantly, he made his decision. "Fine, I'll choose the second option," Evan said defiantly, staring at his father. "I'll marry whoever you choose, but only because I'm not going through treatment." Richard nodded, showing no visible emotion, though deep down he felt that this was the only way to save his son. "Good. You'll marry the woman I choose. But remember, you'll live a normal life. No interference from me, and no more of my money. You'll learn to earn your way and achieve everything on your own." Evan left his father's study with a frown on his face. The challenge was accepted, but he wasn't going to give up so easily. As he walked down the hallway, he was already thinking of ways to get out of the situation without giving up his privileges. "I'll get married, but as soon as I get what I want, I'll get rid of this woman," Evan thought to himself. Back in his office, Richard pondered the risky step he had just taken. He knew this was the only way to save his son. Later, he began thinking about who could play the role of the wife. Richard had already noticed a young woman working at a restaurant he often visited. Her name was Lily. She was hardworking, modest, and took care of her family. Richard knew that convincing Lily wouldn't be easy. She was a strong-willed person with a sense of dignity, which he had noticed in their conversations. But there was something Richard could leverage: Lily's sick mother. She had once mentioned her mother's illness in passing, and since then, Richard had been leaving her generous tips. Lily worked tirelessly at a small restaurant. Her workdays were long, and each day felt like the one before, serving food, smiling at customers, and making sure everything ran smoothly. She did it all for her mother, who had been ill for a long time and required constant care. The cost of treatment and medications was high, and Lily barely made ends meet with her salary. Yet, despite all the difficulties, she never lost hope, and her positive attitude brightened the restaurant. One evening, as she was clearing plates, Richard walked into the restaurant. He was one of the regular customers, always polite and generous with his tips. Lily approached him with her usual smile. "Good evening, Richard." "The usual?" she asked, holding her notepad. "Good evening, Lily." "Yes, the usual," Richard replied, though this time his expression was more thoughtful. Lily placed the order in the kitchen but noticed that Richard was watching her in a way that made her uneasy. When she returned with the food, Richard motioned for her to sit down across from him. "Lily, I'd like to talk to you about something important," Richard said with unexpected seriousness. Lily tensed, not understanding what this was about. "What is it?" she asked, feeling a slight sense of unease. Richard paused for a moment. He knew what he was about to propose would likely shock her, but he also understood that if he didn't try, his plan could fall apart. "Lily, I've been observing your work, and I know your situation. I see how responsible and hardworking you are, and I admire that. I've come here to make you an offer that might seem unusual, but I ask you to think it over seriously before you turn it down." Lily frowned, becoming even more confused. "What kind of offer?" she asked, trying to keep her composure. "I want you to marry my son," Richard said cautiously. "I understand this sounds strange, but I'm willing to offer you financial help that will ensure your mother receives the best treatment." Lily froze, as if time had stopped. Marry Richard's son? She could never have imagined such a thing, even in her wildest dreams. She had seen Evan a few times at the restaurant, always surrounded by loud friends and with an arrogant demeanor. She wanted nothing to do with him. "This is a very strange proposal. Why would you do this?" she asked, trying to process what she had just heard. Richard nodded sympathetically. "I understand, Lily. I know this is a serious step, and I don't expect you to decide right away. But believe me, this could change your life and your mother's life. Evan needs to learn the real value of life, and I think you can help him. In return, I will make sure your mother gets the care she needs." Lily lowered her gaze, feeling the weight of his words. Her mother was the most important person to her, and Richard's offer represented a chance to give her a better life and the medical treatment she desperately needed. But on the other hand, marrying a man she barely knew, especially someone like Evan, who was always drinking and gambling, seemed like an impossible price to pay. "I'm not sure I want to live with your son." "And why me, anyway?" Lily finally asked, raising her eyes to meet Richard's. "There are many other women who would accept your offer without a second thought. I'm just a waitress." Richard shook his head with a slight smile. "That's exactly why you, Lily. You're genuine, honest, and hardworking. These are the qualities I believe can change Evan. He needs to understand that there are things in life that truly matter, and you can show him that." Lily sighed heavily, her mind swirling with confusion. The offer was tempting, but the cost of her personal freedom seemed too high. Yet, when she thought of her mother's weak smile and the nights she spent by her bedside, something inside her began to lean toward the decision. "I need to think about it," Lily finally said, feeling like she couldn't make such a decision right then. "I'll give you an answer later?" "Of course, Lily. Take your time, think it over. But remember, this opportunity could change your life and your mother's life forever," Richard said, standing up and leaving an envelope on the table. "There's enough in here to cover your mother's treatment for the next month." Lily looked at the envelope, then back at Richard, feeling a mix of gratitude and fear. When he left, she knew that the hardest decision of her life lay ahead. That night, Lily sat by her mother's bedside, watching her sleep and struggling to breathe. She opened the envelope Richard had left behind and saw the amount of money inside. Tears welled up in her eyes. She knew that agreeing to this proposal would mean stepping into a completely different world. But perhaps it was the sacrifice she had to make for her mother's sake. The next morning, Lily returned to the restaurant, her decision made. She found Richard at his usual table and approached him with a determined look on her face. "I agree, Richard," she said firmly, though deep down she still felt unsure. "I'll marry your son. But I'm doing this for my mother." A faint smile of satisfaction appeared on Richard's face. "You won't regret this, Lily. I promise I'll do everything I can to make sure you and your mother are well taken care of." Before the wedding, Richard thought it would be wise to introduce Evan and Lily to each other more formally. He invited her to dinner at their home, hoping they could spend some time together and get to know one another. Lily accepted the invitation with trepidation, fully aware that this wouldn't be an ordinary dinner. It was a meeting with the man she was about to marry, a man she barely knew. When Lily arrived at Richard's home, she was nervous. She had heard unflattering things about Evan, and his reputation did not inspire confidence. Still, she resolved to remain strong, as Richard had asked her to. Evan, knowing that his father had invited Lily to dinner to get to know him better, immediately devised a plan to scare her off and make her reconsider the marriage. He was determined to do whatever it took to avoid the marriage his father had arranged for him. He didn't want to live a normal life, and the last thing he wanted was to marry a simple waitress. When Lily arrived, Richard greeted her warmly at the door, offering her a friendly welcome. She was a little tense. Meeting Evan, whom she had only seen a few times in the restaurant but heard much about, filled her with unease. "Please, come in, Lily," Richard said with a smile. "I'm glad you accepted the invitation. I think this is a good chance for you and Evan to get to know each other better." Lily nodded and walked into the living room, where Evan was already sitting, lazily lounging in a chair with a glass of whiskey in his hand. He glanced at her indifferently before saying, "Ah, here comes our heroine," he said sarcastically, not bothering to hide his disdain. "Welcome to my humble castle." Lily furrowed her brow but tried to remain calm. "Thank you," she replied curtly, feeling that the evening would be difficult. They sat down for dinner, and Richard tried to keep the conversation light and polite. However, Evan wasn't interested in pleasant conversation. He was determined to execute his plan. "So, Lily," he began with a smirk, sipping his whiskey. "I'm sure you've heard I'm the bad guy, right? The terrible son who wastes his father's money, drinks, and gambles. Well, it's all true. So, maybe you should think twice before getting involved with me." Lily looked at him in surprise, but instead of being offended, she responded calmly. "I knew what I was getting into, Evan. That doesn't scare me." Evan scoffed, clearly irritated by her composure. "Of course it doesn't. You think you can change me, right? Like in some cheesy movie? Well, I don't want to change. You're the one trying to come into my world, but I don't want you there." Richard listened with difficulty but refrained from intervening, hoping Lily could handle Evan. He knew his son was doing everything he could to push her away. "I'm not trying to change you, Evan," Lily replied evenly. "But to be honest, I'm not thrilled with the way you're acting right now." Evan was taken aback by her response. He had expected his harsh words to scare her off immediately, but Lily held her ground. "Then why are you here?" he sneered. "You could marry someone else, someone decent and honorable, not someone like me." Lily sighed and looked him directly in the eyes. "I'm not here because I like you or because you like me, Evan. I'm doing this for my mother, who needs treatment. If you really don't want this marriage, then say it outright, instead of acting like a child trying to run away from responsibility." Evan fell silent for a moment, stunned by her directness. She wasn't the weak woman he thought he could intimidate. Her words stung, even though he didn't want to admit it. "How noble," he said sarcastically. "Selling yourself for your mother's treatment. Impressive." Lily's cold stare cut through him, and she wasn't about to tolerate such insults. "This isn't selling myself, Evan. It's a choice. And I'm making this choice consciously. But I suppose you wouldn't understand that. You've always gotten everything you wanted without lifting a finger." Evan felt the sharpness of her words hit the mark. He had no response because Lily was right. He had always gotten everything from his father without doing anything for himself. Richard, sensing that the conversation was escalating, decided to step in. "That's enough," he said firmly, looking at his son. "Evan, I gave you a chance to change your life. Lily is a worthy person, and you should at least try to become a man who deserves to stand by her side. I still believe you're capable of more than just being rude and destroying your life." Evan gritted his teeth, turning away as if the words didn't affect him, but deep down, he knew this conversation had struck a chord. Richard turned to Lily and said quietly, "Lily, I know this isn't easy, but I ask you to give him a chance. Evan is lost, but I still believe that with your help, he can find himself. I don't expect you to tolerate his rudeness, but maybe he will change. Just try." Lily considered it for a moment. Her heart told her that this marriage would be difficult, but in Richard's eyes, she saw genuine hope that his son could change. She nodded, making her decision. "All right, Richard. I'll give him a chance. But it's up to him." After dinner, Lily left the house feeling tense but confident that she had made the right choice. Evan, on the other hand, sat alone in his chair, staring at his empty glass, reflecting on Lily's words. She hadn't given in to his provocations, and that bothered him more than he wanted to admit. The wedding day arrived, and Lily felt as if she were in a dream. Everything had happened too quickly since she had agreed to marry Evan. The preparations for the wedding, the paperwork, the organization of the ceremony, it had all passed in a whirlwind. And now she stood on the brink of becoming the wife of a man she barely knew and who didn't love her. The ceremony was simple, even cold. Only Richard, a few of his business partners, and a handful of Evan's friends, who were more there to mock the situation than support him, were present. Evan, dressed in an elegant suit, remained silent for most of the time. His face showed no emotion, and he treated the ceremony like a formality. Lily, on the other hand, wore a simple white dress, custom-made for the occasion by Richard. Although the dress was beautiful, she didn't feel like a bride. The atmosphere was too strained, and the lack of love between them was palpable. When the time came to exchange rings, they exchanged brief glances, both simply going through the motions. Lily tried to smile, but Evan only nodded, as if fulfilling an obligation. The woman officiating the ceremony read the vows, but to Lily, everything sounded distant, like an echo. "Evan, do you take Lily to be your wife?" she asked. Evan nodded with visible indifference. "Yes, I do." When it was Lily's turn, she felt a lump in her throat. She searched Evan's face for any sign of emotion, but found none. Holding back a sigh, she quietly said, "Yes, I do." With those words, they were now husband and wife. However, for each of them, this meant completely different things. For Evan, it was merely a step in his father's plan, something he had to do to avoid losing money and going to treatment. For Lily, it was a sacrifice she made for her mother. After the ceremony, everyone went to a small dinner at their country house. The guests, mostly Richard's business partners and Evan's friends, chatted amongst themselves while Evan stood off to the side, holding a glass of wine and staring into the distance. Lily tried to engage in conversation with the guests, but felt out of place. She knew that most of them looked down on her, seeing her as nothing more than a waitress who had somehow married into a wealthy family. Richard observed the scene, seeing how his son remained distant while Lily tried to find her footing. He felt a twinge of guilt for dragging her into this plan, but he still believed that in time, Lily would be able to change Evan. Finally, the reception ended, and Evan and Lily were left alone in their large, cold house. Evan immediately retreated to his room without saying a word, leaving Lily alone in the living room. She sighed heavily, realizing that the days and possibly years ahead would not be easy. But she was determined to fulfill her part of the deal. After all, she had done this for her mother. That first night, Lily slept alone. Evan didn't attempt to speak to her, and it was clear he had no intention of building any kind of relationship beyond the formalities. Lily, however, tried to stay calm, reminding herself of why she had agreed to this in the first place: her mother's health. The first weeks after the wedding were especially hard for Lily. Evan remained indifferent and distant, treating her as a stranger in the house. He avoided talking to her, and when they were in the same room, the tension was thick in the air. Lily would go to work during the day, finding solace in her duties at the restaurant, then return to the cold, silent house in the evening. One evening, as Lily was preparing dinner, Evan walked into the kitchen for the first time since they got married and spoke to her. "Don't think this will last long," he said coldly. "As soon as I get what I want, this marriage will be over. You won't change me, so don't even try." Lily looked at him with calm but firm eyes and responded, "I'm not trying to change you, Evan. I know this isn't easy for either of us. I'm here for my mother, not for any other reason." Evan scowled, surprised by her directness, but said nothing more. He turned and left the room, leaving Lily alone once again. As the weeks passed, their relationship remained strained. Evan treated Lily as if she didn't exist, while she continued to go about her life, managing her work and taking care of her mother. Lily tried to make small efforts to bridge the gap between them, but Evan's walls were firmly in place. Then, one evening, Evan approached Lily with an unusual request. He looked agitated, and his eyes darted nervously as he spoke. "Lily, I need to talk to you," he said, sitting down across from her at the dining table. Lily looked up from her paperwork, sensing something was wrong. "What's going on, Evan?" she asked calmly but cautiously. He hesitated for a moment before finally blurting out, "I need some money. Just a little, and I promise I'll pay it back." "It's urgent?" Lily frowned. She had heard these words before. Evan had asked for money on urgent matters before, which had often turned out to be for gambling. She knew what might be coming and felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "Evan," she said, her voice steady but firm, "what money are you asking for?" He avoided her gaze, fidgeting with his hands. "The money your father gives for your mother's treatment. I just need a bit of it for now. I'll pay it back, I swear. It's just temporary." Lily's heart sank. This was the money for her mother's care, her lifeline. And now Evan wanted to risk it for his gambling habits? A wave of anger surged through her, but she fought to stay calm. "You want to take the money meant for my mother's treatment?" "For what, Evan?" she asked, her voice growing colder. Evan grew defensive, sensing the anger in her voice. "It's just temporary. I'll return it, I swear. Once I make some money from this deal, I'll pay it all back with interest." "Evan," Lily interrupted him sharply, "are you seriously asking me to gamble away my mother's treatment money? After everything that's happened? These funds are for her life, not for you to throw away in a casino." Evan's frustration boiled over. He clenched his fists and raised his voice. "I said I'll pay it back. Why don't you believe me? Do you think I can't handle this?" Lily didn't let his anger intimidate her. She stayed calm, though her voice was firm as steel. "I won't give you that money, Evan. I've seen where this leads. This isn't about handling things or doing the right thing, it's your addiction, and you know it. I'm not going to stand by while you destroy everything we're trying to build. Evan's face turned red with rage, his eyes flashing with frustration. He approached her, his voice growing colder. You think you can control me? Just because you have your dad's money now, you think you can boss me around? This is my life, and I'll do what I want. Lily stood up, meeting his gaze head-on. Yes, Evan, it's your life. But if you go down this path again, you won't just destroy your own life, you'll destroy ours. Those funds are for my mother's health, and I won't let you waste them. And no, I won't stand by and watch you ruin everything. Evan was left speechless. His anger still flared, but he couldn't find the words to counter her. Lily, her voice unwavering, left him standing alone in the room, feeling the weight of the tension between them. That night, Evan's frustration simmered, but deep down, he knew Lily was right. He had been blinded by his need for quick fixes and gambling, but now he was forced to confront the truth. In the days that followed, Lily realized she couldn't deal with Evan's issues alone. Though he no longer drank or gambled, his addictive tendencies hadn't disappeared. He avoided communication, locking himself in his room and playing video games all day, refusing to look for work or contribute meaningfully to their lives. Lily, seeing no progress and no effort on Evan's part, decided it was time to involve Richard again. Hello, Richard. Lily's voice shook as she made the call. It's Lily. We need to talk. What's wrong? Richard's voice immediately turned serious. Lily rarely contacted him directly. It's about Evan, she began, her frustration and helplessness apparent. He stopped gambling, but nothing else has changed. He spends his days avoiding work, locking himself in his room, and playing games. He won't talk, he won't try to fix things, and I don't know what to do anymore. I'm afraid this is all going to go back to how it was before. Richard paused for a moment, his anger clearly growing, though he kept his voice controlled. All right, Lily. I understand. I'll handle this immediately. Without wasting any time, Richard got into his car and headed toward their home. His mind raced with thoughts of how many chances he had already given his son. Yet, it was becoming clear that more drastic measures were needed. When Richard arrived at the house, Lily greeted him at the door, her expression worried but resolved. She motioned toward Evan's room, where he had holed himself up. Richard didn't hesitate. He marched down the hall and threw open the door without knocking. Evan, immersed in a video game, didn't even notice his father enter. Evan. Richard's voice boomed through the room, startling his son. Evan turned, surprised and irritated by his father's sudden appearance. What are you doing here, Dad? He asked, annoyance evident in his tone. I'm here to put an end to this nonsense, Richard said coldly. You sit in here all day, playing games, instead of trying to change your life. You promised to become a better person, but you're falling back into your old ways. This ends now. Evan tried to argue, but Richard cut him off. Starting tomorrow, you're going to work as a laborer at my company. You want to understand what money is? What hard work really means? You'll find out. Your games are over? Evan was outraged. Dad, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to work as a laborer. That's beneath me. Beneath you. Richard's voice exploded with anger. It's not the job that's beneath you, Evan, it's your lack of responsibility and laziness that are beneath you. You've become a disgrace, and if you won't change on your own, I'll make sure you do. You're going to work, and that's not up for discussion. Evan tried to object again, but Richard had had enough. In a fit of rage, he marched over to the computer, unplugged it, and took it away. The games are done, Evan. Starting now, you're rebuilding your life from scratch. The next morning, Evan begrudgingly reported to his father's company. The job as a laborer felt beneath him, but he had no choice. He spent his days moving heavy boxes, unloading trucks, and performing hard physical labor. It was grueling work, and every night he came home exhausted. At first, Evan approached the job with resentment, but over time, something began to shift inside him. Through the sweat and the toil, he started to understand what hard work truly meant. He realized that the money he had always taken for granted was the result of real effort. As the days turned into weeks, Evan found himself slowly changing. He no longer came home filled with anger and frustration. Instead, he became quieter, more reflective, and started appreciating the value of honest work. One evening, after returning from work, Evan approached Lily in the kitchen, where she was preparing dinner. Lily, he began quietly but with sincerity, thank you for stopping me from making a huge mistake. I'm sorry for everything I put you through. I realize now that I was wrong. Lily, hearing the genuine remorse in his voice, smiled gently but quickly hid her smile. Thank your father, not me. I've endured enough, and if it weren't for the money, I would have left after the second day. Evan winced at her words, feeling a deep sting of guilt. But he knew she was right. As the days passed, Lily and Evan began to find small ways to connect. Their dinners became less awkward, and though their conversations were short, there was a growing sense of understanding between them. Lily continued to show patience, while Evan worked hard at his job, slowly learning the value of responsibility and hard-earned money. A few months later, their relationship started to evolve. While Evan still had moments of frustration, he became more respectful toward Lily. He stopped treating her like a stranger and began to see her as a partner in their shared life, someone who had stood by him during his darkest times. The coldness that had once defined their interactions began to thaw. One evening, as they sat together after a long day of work, Evan surprised Lily with a suggestion. "How about we go out to dinner tonight? Just the two of us," he asked, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. Lily blinked in surprise. It was the first time Evan had initiated anything resembling a date since their marriage. "Sure," she replied with a small smile. "That sounds nice." They went to a quiet restaurant, ordered simple meals, and for the first time in months, their conversation flowed naturally. They talked about their work, their challenges, and even their dreams for the future, things they had never discussed before. At one point, Evan asked Lily something unexpected. "Did you ever think about what you'd be doing if you hadn't married me?" Lily looked down at her hands, thinking for a moment before answering. "I guess I'd still be working at the restaurant, taking care of my mom," she said honestly. "She's always been my priority. And you? What would you be doing if your father hadn't forced you into this?" Evan sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I'd probably still be living the same useless life, partying, gambling, doing nothing important. I never thought that working could actually give me a sense of accomplishment. But now, I see things differently, thanks to you." Lily was touched by his sincerity. For the first time, she felt like they were truly connecting, not just as people forced into a marriage, but as two individuals trying to find their way together. As the weeks went on, Evan continued to change. He became more dedicated to his work, spending long hours at the company, and for the first time in his life, he felt proud of what he was accomplishing. He began taking on more responsibility, showing his father that he was serious about becoming a better person. Meanwhile, Lily's own career was also improving. She had been promoted to restaurant manager, a position she had earned through her dedication and hard work. With this new role, she gained more control over her life, and for the first time, she felt that she and Evan were building a future together. But the biggest change came when Evan took a personal interest in Lily's mother. He started visiting her at the hospital, bringing her flowers and small gifts, showing a genuine care that neither Lily nor her mother had expected. "Hello, Mrs. Peterson," Evan said one day, entering the hospital room with a bouquet of fresh flowers. "I thought you might like these." Lily's mother, surprised by his gesture, smiled weakly. "Thank you, Evan. But why are you doing this? Lily doesn't even know you've been visiting." Evan sat by her bedside and replied, "I want to help, but I want to do it on my own, without anyone's help. I want to be responsible for my family. Please, don't tell Lily just yet." Mrs. Peterson nodded, her trust in Evan slowly growing. She could see that he was genuinely trying to change. In the following weeks, Evan made it a habit to visit Lily's mother regularly, even speaking with her doctors and taking on the financial responsibility for her treatments, without Richard's money. He paid for everything with the money he earned from his job, proud to finally contribute something meaningful. One day, Lily went to the hospital to pay for her mother's treatments, but she was surprised to hear from the receptionist, "The bill has already been covered for the next month." Lily was confused and assumed that Richard had taken care of it again. But when she asked her mother about it, the truth came out. "No, dear," Mrs. Peterson said gently. "It was Evan. He's been visiting me and paying for my treatments himself. He's changed a lot, Lily. I think he really cares about you and your family." Lily was stunned. She had never imagined Evan would go this far. Her heart swelled with emotion as she realized that he wasn't just going through the motions anymore, he was truly making an effort to be a better person. That evening, when Lily returned home, she found Evan sitting on the couch, watching TV. She sat beside him, her emotions swirling inside. "Evan," she said quietly, "my mom told me everything. I'm really touched by what you've done. I didn't expect it, and I want to thank you. But why? Why did you do all of this on your own?" Evan turned off the TV and looked into her eyes. "Because I want to take care of you and your family, Lily," he said sincerely. "I don't want to rely on my father's money anymore. I want to be responsible, to do things for you because you've changed me. You've shown me what it means to care about someone else. And now, I want to do the same for you." Lily was quiet for a moment, processing his words. She hadn't expected Evan to open up like this, but she could see how much he had changed. Slowly, her heart began to soften toward him. "All right, Evan," she said gently. "Let's keep moving forward. I'll give you the chance you deserve, but you have to keep proving to me that you're serious." Evan smiled, a weight lifting off his shoulders. He knew that this was the beginning of something real. Over the next few weeks, their relationship continued to grow. Evan remained committed to his job and to taking care of Lily's mother. He worked hard to earn Lily's trust, and little by little, he succeeded. They spent more time together, and for the first time in their marriage, they began to feel like a true couple. One evening, they decided to invite Richard over for dinner to share some important news. Together, they prepared a meal and set the table. When Richard arrived, Lily greeted him warmly, and they all sat down to eat. As they exchanged small talk, Evan and Lily exchanged glances, knowing it was time to reveal what had been on their minds. "Dad," Evan began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "Lily and I have something to tell you. We've finally become a real family. We're happy together now, and we've found a way to make things work." Richard listened closely, nodding as his son spoke. He had seen the changes in Evan but didn't know what they were about to share. Then Lily handed Richard an envelope. "These are the funds you've been giving us for my mother's treatment," Lily said softly as she handed him the envelope. "We don't need them anymore." Richard looked confused as he took the envelope from her hands. "What do you mean?" he asked, his brow furrowed in puzzlement. Evan quickly added, "Dad, I've been paying for all of her treatments with my own money. I've been working hard, and I no longer need your financial support." Richard was taken aback, his eyes shifting between Evan and Lily, then to the envelope in his hands. He had never expected his son to reach this level of independence. "You've been paying for it all yourself?" Richard asked, clearly impressed. "Yes," Evan said firmly. "For the past few months, I've been covering everything. I want to take responsibility for my family. I don't need your money anymore." Richard's face slowly softened, and a look of pride filled his eyes. He placed the envelope on the table and nodded, his voice filled with emotion. "I'm so proud of you, son," Richard said warmly. "This is exactly what I hoped would happen. You've proven that you can stand on your own 2 feet. You've shown me that you're ready to be the man I always knew you could be." Evan smiled, feeling the weight of his father's approval lifting from his shoulders. "And because of that," Richard continued with a grin, "I'd like to offer you a promotion at the company. You've earned it through your hard work and dedication." Evan was stunned by the offer. He hadn't expected such a significant gesture from his father, but he knew he had earned it. "Thank you, Dad," Evan said with gratitude. "I'll take the opportunity and do my best." Lily sat next to him, her heart swelling with pride and joy. Evan had come so far, and now their lives were truly beginning to take shape. They had built something real together, and now they had a future to look forward to. Over the next year, their lives continued to improve. Evan thrived in his new position at the company, earning enough to support both himself and Lily, as well as pay for her mother's treatments. His confidence grew, and he became a man Lily could rely on. Lily, too, flourished in her career. No longer just a waitress, she had risen to the position of restaurant manager, gaining the respect and recognition she deserved. Together, she and Evan built a life they were both proud of. But the greatest joy for both Lily and Evan came when Lily's mother, Mrs. Peterson, fully recovered from her illness. The treatment, which Evan had been funding with his hard-earned money, had proven successful. Mrs. Peterson regained her health and was able to return to a more normal life. Every day, her strength grew, and she no longer needed constant care. For Lily, seeing her mother well again was the ultimate reward for all the sacrifices she had made. One evening, as the entire family gathered around the dinner table, Mrs. Peterson spoke with gratitude in her voice. "I can't thank you both enough for everything you've done for me," she said, smiling warmly at Lily and Evan. "I feel like I've been given a second chance at life, and it's all because of you." Evan, feeling a little embarrassed by the attention, smiled modestly. "We did what we had to, Mrs. Peterson. I'm just glad you're feeling better now." Lily, sitting beside him, felt her heart swell with pride. Over the course of their marriage, Evan had grown into a man she could trust and respect. He was no longer the reckless, spoiled person she had initially married. He had transformed into someone who took responsibility for his actions and cared deeply for his family. As the months passed, Evan and Lily's bond grew even stronger. They began to find joy in the simple moments of life, sharing meals together, taking walks, and discussing their dreams for the future. They had become not just husband and wife, but true partners, supporting each other in everything they did. One day, as they sat together in their cozy living room, Evan turned to Lily with a thoughtful expression. "I've been thinking about something," he said, his voice soft. "What's that?" Lily asked, her curiosity piqued. "I know this marriage started off as a deal between our families," he began, choosing his words carefully. "But now, I feel like we've built something real. Something I never expected." Lily smiled, understanding where he was going with this. "I feel the same way, Evan. We've come a long way, haven't we?" Evan nodded, his eyes filled with warmth. "I never thought I could change. I never thought I'd be happy in a life like this, but you've shown me that there's so much more to life than what I used to chase after. I'm grateful for that, and for you." Lily reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "You've changed a lot, Evan. And I'm proud of the man you've become." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both reflecting on the journey they had been through. It had been a difficult road, full of challenges and struggles, but they had made it through together. Now, they were stronger than ever, and their future seemed brighter than they had ever imagined. One evening, Evan suggested they visit Mrs. Peterson at her home, where she was now living independently. They brought her flowers and spent time reminiscing about the past year. As they sat together, Mrs. Peterson watched the two of them with a knowing smile. "You know," she said, her voice soft but full of warmth, "I always believed that the two of you were meant for each other. Even when things were tough, I could see how much you both had the potential to change each other's lives for the better." Evan and Lily exchanged a glance, both feeling the truth in her words. They had started their marriage under difficult circumstances, but through patience, love, and hard work, they had built something real. Later that night, as they walked home hand in hand, Evan turned to Lily with a smile. "I think we should take a little vacation," he said. "Just the two of us. We've been working so hard, and I think we deserve a break." Lily laughed softly. "That sounds like a wonderful idea. Where do you want to go?" "Anywhere, as long as we're together," Evan replied, his eyes twinkling with affection. The thought of traveling together excited them both. It felt like a fresh start, a new chapter in their lives, one that they were ready to embrace with open hearts. In the weeks that followed, Evan and Lily planned their trip, choosing a quiet beach destination where they could relax and enjoy each other's company without the pressures of work or responsibilities. The anticipation of the trip brought them even closer, and they spent their evenings talking about all the things they wanted to do once they arrived. When the day finally came, they boarded the plane, feeling like they were embarking on a new adventure, not just a vacation, but a new phase of their life together. The sun, the sand, and the sea awaited them, but most importantly, they had each other. As they sat together on the beach, watching the sunset over the horizon, Evan took Lily's hand and looked into her eyes. "I love you, Lily," he said quietly, the words coming naturally. Lily smiled, her heart full. "I love you too, Evan." They had started as strangers, bound together by circumstance, but now, they were something much more. They were a family, a real one, built on love, trust, and the shared belief that they could face any challenge as long as they were together. And so, as the waves gently lapped against the shore, Evan and Lily knew that whatever the future held, they were ready to face it, side by side. Thank you for listening to the story to the end. Write your thoughts about it in the comments. Subscribe to the channel Tell Me and share this video with your friends and loved ones. This motivates us to continue working on new stories every day. Do not miss the next amazing story that is about to appear on your screen. We are very grateful to you for being with us. In the description under this video you can open the catalog of all the stories. See you there.